Ladies and gentlemen, UFC 330 is knocking on our doors.
Housekeeping.
As one of the most highly anticipated fights of 2026 is just about here. And I gotta say, there is so much at stake in the main event here. This isn't just, from an X's and O's standpoint, a fascinating matchup between the pound-for-pound number one fighter in the sport in Islam Makhachev and one of the greatest fighters of all time, if not the greatest fighter of all time, versus the true number one contender at 170 pounds in Ian Machado Garry, who only has one loss in the UFC, and that comes at the hands of what was looked at as the boogeyman of 170 pounds at the time in Shavkat Rakhmonov. Outside of that, Ian Machado Garry has had the answers for some of the most difficult puzzles in the welterweight division. And not only is this just a super fascinating fight all around stylistically, but what's at stake here? Right? I don't know if this is being talked about enough. Islam Makhachev has won 16 fights in a row in the UFC. That is remarkable. He is currently tied with Anderson Silva for the record. So if he can go out here and beat Ian Machado Garry, he is no longer tied with Anderson and has the record for most consecutive wins in UFC history at 17. So a guy that a lot of people, including myself, have said is the greatest mixed martial artist of all time in Islam Makhachev, with the resume he already has, imagine he goes out here and beats a contender in the prime of his career as good as Ian Machado Garry. And not to mention, this would be him defending the welterweight belt for the very first time. And what this would mean for Ian if he can go out here and take out the number one pound-for-pound fighter in the sport, one of the greatest fighters of all time. This would be, without a doubt, the biggest moment and the biggest win of Ian's career. So I wanted to kind of, break down the magnitude of this. For some reason, to me, it's like, yeah, there's some hype here, and I understand that the card overall is a little bit underwhelming, but this main event is so good, man. This is what makes the UFC the best sport in the world to me. Whenever you have the true number one guy who's looking like he has the answers for everybody, and he's going to fight the best fighter in the world. We got best on best. It doesn't get any better than that. What I want to do is kind of go through this fight, break it down. I'm probably going to be a little bit all over the place. I'm going to be nerding out, man, because this is one of those fights. This is one of those fights where you get into the weeds. You're like the foot battle, right? The movement, the this, that. We're going to do all of that in this video. So I'm going to kind of give you a little bit of an overview of my thoughts on this matchup stylistically. Then we're going to break down Ian Machado Garry, what he's done in the UFC, what he brings to the table stylistically, how he can get the job done in this fight, and what I think is going to be very, very troubling that he does for Islam. And then we are going to do the same exact thing for Islam Makhachev. Now, when we talk about this matchup, man, this is just so fascinating to me. And I understand that there is the possibility that we could build this up kind of like the JDM fight. People are going to be, whoa, wait a minute, man. Jake said that JDM could potentially be a problem for Islam, and we saw what happened in that fight. So, of course, in any fight that has to do with Islam and the greatness that he brings to the table, that is always a possibility. But I feel pretty confident in saying I don't believe that Ian Garry is going out like JDM in this fight. I feel like Ian is going to scramble. I feel like he is going to move, and he is going to risk being submitted in this fight, opposed to JDM, who just camped out on bottom and just basically accepted being dominated on the deck the entire time. So I think Ian Garry brings a lot more of a unique style to the table that could potentially be very troubling for Islam in this fight. And one of those things is, you see the reach right here. Ian Garry is going to have a 4.5-inch reach advantage. He's going to be quite a bit taller than Islam. Ian Garry is, in terms of the range, the most difficult puzzle that Islam has had to deal with in his entire career. right? And normally, how do we see Islam have to fight, right? A lot of the time, he's very comfortable, very safe on the outside, relying on kind of the rangy kickboxing, moving around in that southpaw stance, attacking the legs, ripping kicks to the body, and really just kind of picking at you with the boxing. And whenever he decides to blitz into range with the boxing, that is normally where Islam is looking to eventually feint, set up a level change, get to the hips, and find a way to take you down, usually along the fence, the octagon side. So in this fight, we're going to have to see Islam break out some tricks that we necessarily haven't really had to see much of from him in his career. And we may have not seen period from Islam, considering that Ian is going to be a lot taller and a lot more rangy than Islam. When you look at Islam's resume, right, you could talk about a guy like Dan Hooker, right? A lot of the fighters that Islam has had to deal with, right? JDM is very flat-footed. He's got a boxing-based style with a high guard to where he walks into the phone booth. Ian Garry does not fight like that. Ian Garry is one of the most rare fighters in the UFC right now in terms of there's very few guys that are really, really good fighting forward and backwards, and Ian Garry is one of those guys. Sean O'Malley, Adesanya, right? Ian Garry, just some guys coming off the top of my head when we look at really high-level strikers. A lot of guys are really good when they're dictating the pace moving forward, but when you put them on their heels, things kind of suffer in their game a little bit. Where with Ian Garry, that's not the case. He can fight very well moving forward and very well moving backward. And listen, I know that Ian Garry, to me, I find Ian Garry rather annoying. But the reality is, you can say whatever you want about him being annoying and the stuff that he's saying, but don't forget how good of a fighter this guy is. Because I feel like people are falling into the trap of, man, F Ian Garry, Islam's going to smash this fool, man. Gary's saying a bunch of dumb stuff. He's unbearable. We need him to lose and all this stuff. You may feel that way, but don't forget how good this guy is. I feel like that happens in MMA, right? A guy like Strickland, Colby, some examples that come to mind, Patty, they start talking so much that you're like, this guy's kind of a clown. But then you forget that, wait a minute, this guy's fantastic. I got to focus on the skill set here. So I'm just bringing that up, man, because I'm a big Islam fan. You guys know that. This is a real problem for him. This is a real problem for him. So Ian Garry's not some slouch coming in here that's some sort of sacrificial lamb for, Islam to go out here and break the Anderson Silva record that he's tied with him for. So Ian Garry is a real threat, man. And we're going to have to see Islam do some things we haven't necessarily had to see him do in his career. Pressuring forward, closing the distance on a tall, rangy opponent that is going to be sniping at him from range. That's going to have an array of difficult weaponry to get through, which we're going to break down when we talk about Ian Garry. So that's why this matchup to me is so fascinating. This is going to be the biggest guy, basically, that Islam has fought, the rangiest, a guy that can fight really well moving forward and backward, has that tall, wiry frame, which those guys aren't always the easiest guys to take down, and a guy that is in the prime of his career that is oozing with confidence. It's a weird word, oozing, but you deal with it. Pause. Ian Garry is roaring with confidence, man. He is, and he doesn't give a damn what anybody thinks, and that's a dangerous man. That's a dangerous dude, man. A guy that believes, he's got confidence. He's like, come on, take me down, Islam. I'd like to see you try type of deal. And ever since Ian Garry's been training over at Chute Box, we've seen his ground game go to the next level. Obviously, whenever you're training with Charles Oliveira, I'd like to think that that's going to happen in your game. But that's the thing about Ian. Throughout his career, he's been traveling all over the world, training with all these different styles of fighters. So he's a guy that's really, really well-rounded out his game. And he's a guy that, before getting into the UFC, his grappling was on display over in Cage Warriors. Like, he's a solid grappler. Now, having said that, this is without a doubt the toughest challenge of Ian Machado Garry's career. And it may be the toughest challenge of Islam's career. Obviously, we're going to have to come fight night, because I think the world of Alexander Volkanovski, and I always thought that stylistically that's a very troubling matchup for Islam. But Ian brings a different set of skills, which we'll talk a little bit more, a specific set of skills, like Liam Neeson, right? He's got a specific set of skills that are troubling. But the reality is, this is by far the most difficult opponent that Ian Machado Garry has fought all around. Now, I know you could say, well, he's been in there with MVP and Carlos Prates. In terms of the striking, obviously, I think those guys are a lot more troubling / dangerous than Islam Makhachev is when it comes to the striking. But the reality is, we know that Islam, while his striking, I don't even want to say it's underrated anymore, because I feel like it's properly rated at this point. People are realizing just how good this guy is on the feet. But it is all about the well-roundedness of Islam. He's shown that he can go out there and display very high fight IQ on the feet. Whenever JDM would go southpaw, what did he do? He butchered that calf, man. He was throwing beautiful calf kicks, right? Kind of showing him some boxing, right? Like he's going to box with him and stand go in the pocket with JDM, kind of throw some feints. Boom, would tap that calf. JDM would look to counter. Islam would circle out. We saw him knock out Volkanovski with a high kick. We've seen that Islam striking over the years has gotten really, really, really good. But going out here and having a 25-minute kickboxing battle with Ian Garry, I would like to think that that's something that is going to favor Ian Garry. So it's going to be very important for Islam to come in here with a good game plan. And I feel like that game plan is going to revolve around moving forward, pressuring, closing the distance, pushing Gary's back up along the fence, and getting to the takedowns. Because the thing about Islam's game is people talk about the wrestling, the pressure, and, the comparisons to Khabib and all that. Him and Khabib are very different stylistically. Right? They're very different, right? Khabib would walk forward, jab you, right? Pressure the heck out of you, throw big overhands. And he was just a smothering pressure pace. Like, people forget, man, like Khabib Nurmagomedov was a freaking animal, dude. So Islam, to me, is a lot more patient, right? So we're going to have to see him put his foot on the gas. We're going to have to see him close the distance and maybe bring out some of those Khabib-like tricks in this fight to be able to close down Ian Garry. Because if Islam just sits at range against Ian Garry, that's going to be a very, very difficult fight for Islam to win, in my opinion. So Islam's going to want to get to the takedowns. And the thing about Islam is people talk about the wrestling, but the reality is that's a disservice to his game. I think that Islam just might be the most complete all-around grappler we've ever seen in MMA. Not only is his wrestling outstanding, his trips, his sweeps, his judo overall, his jiu-jitsu game, he is the full package of grappler. He can do everything when it comes to the grappling. He can shoot an athletic shot out in space. He can push you up along the fence, and he's very good in the clinch with the knees and the elbows. He's got great trips and throws. He has multiple layers to his game to be able to get you down. So while Ian Garry might have had some good moments against Shavkat Rakhmonov, yes, Shavkat is good, but he's not Islam. Islam has an entire system of, I got the single, that's not working. I can go to a double. That's not working. I have trips, I have sweeps, I have throws. He has a multitude of ways to be able to get you to the ground, and that's what makes Islam so difficult to prepare for when it comes to his grappling. A lot of guys are good at defending a single. They're good at defending a double. But how about your judo game? Right? If I defend a single and I'm like, yeah, I stopped it. Oh, wait, now I'm getting tipped over. Now I'm getting tripped. Head and arm throw. Boom, now I'm on my back and Islam's in side control. Now he's smashing through, passing my guard. Boom, now he's in half guard, sitting on top of me. Now you got a problem. And the more Islam can take you down, and you have to explode and work back to your feet, that is going to be very, very draining for someone like Ian Machado Garry. I feel like this is one of those things where I don't really look at it as a striker versus grappler type of matchup because we've seen that Islam is very, very, very good on the feet. But I will say, if this plays out predominantly on the feet, I feel like the edge goes to Ian Garry to where if the fight hits the floor, that clearly favors Islam Makhachev. So while I don't view it as a striker versus grappler, I feel like that dynamic for this fight will describe who is ultimately going to get the job done based off of how these guys match up stylistically. And whoever is able to implement their game and bring in an intelligent game plan here, I think is going to get the job done. And I know that sounds kind of basic, but both of these guys are so well coached and so smart when it comes to, operating in the octagon. They got very high fight IQ. So that's kind of my preview and hyping this up the way that I kind of look at this fight. But let's talk about Ian Machado Garry first. Because Ian Garry was one of these guys that when he came into the UFC, right, he was talking a big game, representing Ireland. And the first thing that people are thinking about is, Conor McGregor, right? And he's like, McGregor said, we're not here to take part, we're here to take over. And, he's going out there getting these knockouts and looking real impressive. But the reality is, Ian Garry's not the hardest hitter in the world, right? He's not a guy that has a ton of explosive power, but what he does have is excellent timing, excellent rhythm, and a really, really, really fundamentally sound ability to walk you into traps. So while people look at a guy like Carlos Prates, who's just kind of walking forward with his hands down and he's got that wiry frame and he's whipping these big old shots in there, that's not Ian Garry. Where with Prates, you're like, oh man, the pressure and the trap, and you just feel the danger. And yes, Prates sets traps, but Ian Garry does it in a different way. He knows that he doesn't have that, I'm just going to sling in the pocket and rip one nasty shot and put you away. Ian Garry is going to be throwing shots at you to see how you react, right? He'll throw a kick to the body. Then he'll see how your hands come down. Oh, now I can throw a high kick just like he did against Daniel D. Rodriguez. And that's where this matchup becomes very interesting, is because Islam is a southpaw, Ian Garry is an orthodox style of opponent. We have an open stance battle on our hands. Now, we'll see if anyone decides to switch. I would not be surprised if we see Islam, maybe go a little bit orthodox in this fight. I'm not ruling that out whatsoever, because Ian Garry in the open stance game, he's dangerous, man. He does a great job controlling with the lead hand, trapping the lead hand. He'll throw the jab off of it, right? He'll kind of, reach the rear hand forward to kind of pull you in, slide out, time you with a counter right hand if you get overly aggressive. He rips kicks to the legs very well, despite whatever stance you're in. And then that kick to the body is going to be available with Islam being in that southpaw stance. Now, having said that, that's where Gary's going to have to be careful, because Islam could absolutely catch a kick and aid that into a takedown, and now you're on your back. And, so there's a give and take with throwing kicks against a grappler. But if Ian Garry comes out here and is able to land those kicks without getting taken down and get Islam's hands coming down, that is where Ian Garry can ultimately get to one of his better setups, which is ripping that kick to the body in the open stance game and eventually setting up that high kick. He'll even throw the right hand and then throw that high kick right behind it. How Leon Edwards was able to knock out Kamaru Usman, that famous combo from Robert Whittaker, the 1-2 high kick. It's a great way to hide that head kick, because I think Ian Garry's going to have to really walk Islam into some things. He's going to have to pull him into range, because Islam's smart. Islam's not a guy that really overextends and gets himself really out of position. So that's where Ian Garry's traps are going to be getting laid all throughout the octagon. He's going to be setting a bear trap here. He's going to be setting, a little trap over here to catch a raccoon. Like, that's Ian's game. That's what he's going to do. And he's got those nasty oblique kicks. And I'm very, 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 very curious to see how Islam is going to address those, because those oblique shots, they're nasty, right? We've seen John Jones throw them throughout, his entire career. We've seen Khalil Roundtree. I think that was that the Bukowskis fight where he was able to stomp his knee out? I mean, those oblique shots are nasty. Now, Ian Garry doesn't really kind of sidekick into it, where that's really dangerous. We've seen McGregor throw a lot of those. He just kind of stomps at it a little bit, chops at it, which is still very dangerous. We saw what he was able to do to Shavkat Rakhmonov. And that's a very deterring weapon that Islam really hasn't had to fight someone that does that. And that's something that can play tricks with your mind, right? If Garry throws one of those and it lands perfectly right on that quad, right just above the knee, and hyperextends, man, that can hurt you. And then it can become discouraging. You're trying to close, Islam's moving forward, trying to close him down, and Garry just goes bang right on the oblique, or throws right at the top of the quad, right by the knee. That's a very, very annoying shot to deal with. Very, very annoying. But by the same token, there's going to be opportunities to where, Islam, anytime Garry kicks, Islam's going to be reaching, trying to grab, trying to aid that into a takedown, try to make Garry pay for throwing those kicks, right? But the reality is, kicks are a big aspect of Ian Machado Garry's game. And if you're an orthodox style opponent and you're going to stand in front of him, man, he will calf kick you all day long. And speaking to the IQ of Ian Garry, right, he kind of throws those calf kicks like Poatan, right? And you know he's a big Poatan fan. He's kind of talked about it before. And Adesanya and these high-level kickboxers, you don't really see the shift in his shoulders. He just kind of whips it out there. Dutch-style technique, a lot like Poatan. So it's very, very hard to pick up on. And Ian Garry's got nasty leg kicks, man. Some of the best leg kicks, I think, in this division and in the game. Very, very underrated kicks. He's got a great jab, likes to pull you into the right hand, will throw some good shots in close. But Ian Garry's going to want to keep this fight at range. And what we've seen from Ian Garry that I find so impressive, when you look at, I know that this is just data, but this is what we're talking about with Ian Garry. Look at the shot selection. Look at how Ian Garry keeps you honest, keeps you guessing, right? Obviously, he's throwing a ton of jabs. He's firing the right hand. He's landing those head kicks, but he doesn't discriminate against ripping to the body. He will attack the body with kicks. He'll, change his boxing combos to rip the body, to take some wind out of the sail, and he will tear up your legs. We saw what he did to Neil Magny. We've seen him do it to pretty much everybody. And since he came into the UFC, right, going out there, that beautiful pull counter, right? Kind of looked McGregor-esque to where he knocked out Williams in the debut. It was beautiful, right? Was able to outscore Weeks. A little underwhelming fight, but still went out there, got it done against Green. Against Song Kanan, got dropped, battled through the adversity, was able to put him away. Very impressive. The way he set up D-Rod, and I get it, D-Rod's a little slower. We just saw him lose to Eurosmedic, but at the time in 2023, that was a solid D-Rod. And the way that he just set him up, you get my point. The way he was able to set the trap in the open stance game against the southpaw in D-Rod. Going out there, shredding the legs of Neil Magny, beating him bad. Had the close one with Jeff Neal, a southpaw, which I think Islam's going to try to take a lot of notes from this fight as well. Some of the things that Jeff Neal was able to weaponize by pushing Garry, up against the fence and weaponizing the clinch, right? Going out there, getting tagged up on the feet by MVP, but showing that he does have good ground skills by taking down Michael Venom Page, which, by the way, is not the easiest thing to do. I know people act like MVP's got no ground game. Like, obviously, that's his weakness, but he's not an easy guy to take down and control. Not many guys have been able to do that. Logan Storley was able to do that in Bellator, but he's a high-level wrestler. So for Ian Garry to be able to do that and take the back is very, very impressive. This Shavkat Rakhmonov fight, which I'm pretty sure was on short notice. Who steps in to do that against Shavkat? Right, and was able to take his back. I mean, I picked Shavkat to win this fight, but I was wildly impressed from what Garry was able to do. Got out of some bad positions. Sure, he got taken down. Was showing good takedown defense, but then eventually Rakhmonov would just add layers, boom, take him down, put him in bad spots. But we saw Garry take his back. We saw Garry starting to pour it on late. Then goes out there against Carlos Prates again, taking on anybody, anytime, anywhere, man. You got to respect that about Garry. The most dangerous, slugger in this weight class, in my opinion, in Prates, one of the most dangerous guys in the UFC, period. A southpaw striker. And this was impressive, disrupting the rhythm of Prates, mixing in some takedowns, taking away some of that forward pressure and momentum that he likes to bring to the table, right? That kind of stifled the game of Prates and made him hesitant. And I know Prates started to pour it on late, but Garry was cruising, man. And then to go out there against Bilal Muhammad and stuff all the takedowns and, rip those kicks out there and just find a way to go out there and batter, a former champion. And I get it. Bilal Muhammad, to me, it looks like he's lost a little bit of a step, but has he? Or is it just because the welterweight division is that good? I feel like it's kind of hard to read where Bilal Muhammad is at this point, but the reality is he's been in there with different styles of opponents that do present a grappling challenge. He's been in there with some really good strikers, and Ian Garry finds ways to win. He finds ways to create openings, to walk you into traps, and I feel like his best path to victory is pretty clear in this fight, to keep this fight on the feet and at kickboxing range. If Ian Garry is able to do that, I think that he can win this fight. I really believe Ian Garry has a real shot to get this done, man. I think that Ian Garry is very, very live in this fight. He's very talented. The traps that he sets, the IQ, his rangy striking, the oblique shots, just the overall package that he brings, and the movement. That's a big thing about Ian Garry's game as well. Volkanovski, with all the movement that he was doing, that was giving Islam some problems. A guy that's not a guy that's going to move back in a straight line all the time. A guy that's kind of like JDM and squatty and plotty, in the squatty and plotty. I kind of like that, but right there in range to where you could just easily throw a shot, JDM high guards, boom, you can easily grab the leg. Not going to be that easy against Ian because Ian Garry's going to be on his bike the whole time. Lots of lateral movement, lots of footwork, lots of feints as well, which is a different thing, which is a different element that Islam hasn't necessarily seen a whole lot of, right? A lot of guys are going to be in there operating at a super high level on the feet. Volkanovski's one of those guys, throwing those feints at you, right? Twitching the hip. Oh, the kick's not coming. Oh, now it is. Feinting the jab. Oh, here comes the right hand. So Ian Garry brings a very sophisticated, well-rounded striking game to the table that will be very, very troubling for anyone in this weight class. I think Ian Garry is one of the best strikers in the UFC, man. Technique for technique, the setups, the footwork. Now, having said that, the footwork is very, very tiring to be on the back foot running around for 25 minutes, especially if you're defending takedowns, you're on your back, you're exploding back to your feet. I feel like that can definitely labor some of the movement. But Ian Garry's movement is excellent. He's never just stationary. He's never just, moving, forward and back in a straight line. He cuts good angles. He's constantly circling, which makes it very, very difficult to close him down to be able to get a hold of him. So for me, Ian Garry's going to have an answer for these takedowns of Islam Makhachev. And we've seen him in the Shavkat fight. He understands what he's doing. He knows how to get the underhooks. He knows how to grab the wizard, dig hard, drive the shoulder pressure in to be able to circle off, get his back along the octagon side. But like I said, it's layers to Islam's game. It's not just, I got to defend a single or a double here or a cross-body single. He can do everything. And that is the element that makes Islam so hard to deal with. But if Garry can keep this fight at kickboxing range on the outside and get his game going with his speed and accuracy and elusiveness, I think Ian Garry is very capable of going out here and pulling off a big upset. Now, when I say upset, I wouldn't find it that shocking, honestly. It's just the reality of upset because of who Islam is and what he's accomplished. But Ian Garry, to me, is very, very game. He's a very high-level fighter, despite me finding him very annoying. When the cage door locks, I really like watching Ian Machado Garry. He's a ton of fun to watch, and every time we see him, he's getting better and better and better. He's a dangerous opponent here for Islam. Now let's talk about Islam Makhachev. Because when we talk about Islam Makhachev, we're talking about, when I look at the greatest fighters of all time, I think of John Jones, I think of Islam Makhachev, I think of George St. Pierre, I think of Demetrius Johnson, I think of Khabib Nurmagomedov, Volkanovski. And what do all of those guys have in common? When you look at their games, it's like, well, where are the weaknesses, right? I know you could say, well, Jones, the boxing, and there's things that you can nitpick and find. But for the most part, they're just complete, well-rounded fighters. And that's what Islam brings to the table. Not only is this guy just super good on the feet when it comes to the striking, where he's gotten much better, but his ground game, we've talked about it enough, it's so high level. He's got so many layers to his game, and that's the reason that he's 28-1, is on a 16-fight win streak, 5 wins by knockout, 13 by submissions. And that's the reality of this fight, is if Islam Makhachev is just playing the back-and-forth kickboxing game with Ian Garry for 25 minutes, that's going to be tough to do. As good of a striker as I think Islam is, it's going to be tough considering how rangy and fast Ian Garry is. That's the reality. So Islam is going to have to find ways to slow down Ian Garry. And I feel like if he slows down Garry with some of the takedowns, and then you start to see some of that movement slow down, those are going to be the moments where Islam can capitalize on the feet with Ian Garry. When Ian is fresh, that's where he's going to be at his best. It's going to be very difficult for Islam to deal with him in that range, in that range and in that specific area of the fight. But as the fight starts to play out, if we get into those mid to later rounds and Ian Garry's getting taken down, he's having to defend takedowns, and you start to, get the blood flowing through the body and you start pumping up the arms, man, that starts to slow you down. That will take away some of that explosiveness and movement to where now that's where Islam really can start to settle in on the feet and start to pick and find his shots. And I think that's what Islam's going to look to do. He's going to look to kind of, give the illusion of him striking early, get to the takedowns, pressure to get to the inside of Garry, get inside that range, take him down, and if he can smash him and control him for 25, he'll do it. If Garry decides to, sneak out of these positions and scramble, that is where Islam is really, really dangerous. Very good in the front headlock position. We know he's got a nasty darce, probably the best in the game in my opinion, to where if he locks that in, Gary's cooked. So that's one of the things that Gary's got to be very careful of, is trying to scramble. He's got to pick and choose when to do it. Because if you just accept bottom, you're just going to get blanketed and lose, kind of like JDM, which I don't think Gary's necessarily going to do. I think he's going to look to play the jiu-jitsu game. He's got to be careful not to spend too much time on bottom. But I feel like Garry will look to make moves off of his back. He will look to try to get back to the feet. And that's going to create those windows of opportunity for Islam to capitalize and lock in some sort of sub, because that's where Islam is really, really dangerous. In that front headlock position, you try to wrestle back into him, which is where Gary's going to have to be careful. Those are areas where Islam is a master at capitalizing. But what we've seen from Islam throughout his career, this is a guy that we all know has an unbelievably impressive resume. And outside of, I just call it a fluke at this point, getting knocked out by the Pantoja doppelganger back in 2015 against Martins, like, who is that guy, man? Like, if you run that fight back, like, Islam Makhachev beats that guy probably in 30 seconds, right? So it's just crazy. That was 2015. That was so long ago, right? And a good learning opportunity, not to overextend and just recklessly close the distance, right? And a long win streak that he's been on, right? Going out here in the Arman Sarukian win, has aged like fine wine. It's a shame we never got the rematch. Submitted Drew Dober, who's a tough challenge. Thiago Moises, who's a solid grappler, especially back in 21. Right? Dan Hooker at the time, 2021. These wins are so good, man. Bob Green, look how good King Green is, man. Out here beating up boxers. Dropping Charles Oliveira on the feet and subbing him. Who does that to Oliveira? Going out there and beating Volkanovski in a crazy back and forth. And one that a lot of people were surprised at how good Islam was doing on the feet. Gets one of the best strikers of all time in Volkanovski. Went out there, knocked him out, short notice for Volk, and he clearly, in my opinion, was out of shape. I don't know why he took the fight, but respect to him. Went out there and got set up. Beautiful high kick by Islam. Was throwing him to the inside leg to the body. Boom, brought up the high kick upstairs. Like how we were talking about Ian Garry setting traps. That was a perfect example of Islam setting traps. Going out here and submitting Dustin Poirier in the 5th round. If you go back and watch this fight, it's like, oh man, when you hear about it, it's like this fight was some sort of war. Poirier had moments, but really this was Islam Makhachev controlling this fight, and it didn't look like he had a game plan. He just kind of went out there and was like, I'm just going to box with Poirier and try to get some takedowns here and there. And I just don't know that he respected Poirier's game in the way he needed to. And I think he was a little compromised coming into this, if I'm not mistaken. But either way, I feel like the game plan was just not good in this fight. And obviously, we know Poirier's a dog and one of the greatest, fighters to never win a belt, but at least 55er is one of the best of all time in this weight class. So Poirier's never an easy out and was able to submit him late with a beautiful, way to get Poirier down, the takedown, right? I mean, it's just nasty stuff. Goes out there, destroys Moicano, and people are like, whoa, Moicano win? What does that mean? Well, it's not his fault. It was supposed to be Arman. And who does that to Moicano? Moicano's a good grappler. And then going out there and dominating JDM, who's a really good boxer. And it's like people are just discrediting JDM's game because he lost to Islam, one of the greats of all time, the best fighter actively in the sport right now. And then he goes out there and gets destroyed by Prates, who's probably the nastiest striker in the UFC right now. So JDM's been having it rough. But the reality is that's a great win by Islam. It's a great win by Islam. And I feel like in this fight for Islam, man, it's just one of those things where we're going to have to see him break out some tricks that we may not have seen from him in his game. He's going to have to close down Ian Garry. Because if he sits out at range, it's not to say that Islam can't go out there and, have a back and forth kickboxing fight. Because we've seen guys, like Jeff Neal. We've seen some guys who, maybe they're looked at as more striking-based fighters than in Islam. But Islam's striking has gotten to the point where he's went in there with some really good strikers and been able to outstrike them on the feet. Look at the strikes he was landing on Volk. Look what he was doing against Poirier. So we've seen time and time again, while Islam is looked at, in terms of being a grappler, we've seen his striking get a heck of a lot better. His boxing has gotten a lot better. He gets a little bit wild at times, especially when he's trying to close the distance. He kind of, throws a little bit too loopy in moments to where I could see Ian Garry sliding out of the way and looking to time some of those, counter shots. But Islam Makhachev is going to have to close down Ian Garry. Push him up against the fence, and we know that is where Islam does some of his best work, is pushing you up against the fence and getting to those takedowns, dragging you down. You defend here, great. I got a trip, I got a throw. He has multiple ways to be able to get you down, and we know that when JDM would just kind of shell up and stand in range, that's not what Gary's going to do. At least I don't think. Gary's going to be sticking and moving. So it's going to be one of those cat and mouse games to where we're going to have to see Islam kind of chase down Garry in a sense, but not overly aggressive and getting so out of position to where you allow Garry to walk you into those counter shots. But an interesting note as well is not only is Islam really good in the clinch, but Ian Garry's one of those guys because he is very tall and rangy. When he backs away, he drops his hands and his chin flies in the air. So that's potentially, even though Ian Garry is a very tall guy, those are potentially some of those moments where Islam Makhachev can threaten with some of those high kicks. We know Islam's got an outstanding high kick. We saw him knock Volk out with it. So I think that's a shot that we could potentially see Islam look to utilize in this fight. And it's an open stance game. We were just talking about it for Ian Garry. Kicks to the body, kicks to the inside leg, ripping those high kicks upstairs. And in the clinch, Islam's really, really good. And Islam's feint game is underrated, right? He'll kind of, fake a left hand, boom. Lead hand uppercut, and then he'll throw a right hook at the same time. Look at the Poirier fight, the uppercuts he was landing. Right, so if he's feinting these level changes and Gary's ducking down to defend takedowns, that opens up strikes. So I feel like this is one of those fights where Islam Makhachev is going to have to break out the full game. He's going to have to pressure Garry. He's going to have to feint level changes to open up the striking, strike with him a little bit to pull him into that kind of game, but at the same time, look to get to those level changes, look to take Ian Garry down, because while we've seen Gary's takedown defense look pretty good for the most part, yes, Shavkat is maybe the closest type of comparison that you can make. He's still not Islam, because I think that Islam is better than Shavkat on the feet. I think Islam's better than Shavkat on the feet. I'm sorry. If you don't agree with that, I'm just saying, man, I think Islam's better than him on the feet. And then I think when it comes to the overall grappling, Makhachev is a step ahead of Rakhmonov. So this is one of those fights where Islam Makhachev, if he can get Ian down, man, I think it's going to be bad, Ian Garry. It's going to be a tough night for Garry. It's going to be a real tough night because not only does Islam get the takedowns, but guys have a very, very hard time of getting back to their feet. And if you do get back to your feet, it's not for free. It's not like you just, defend it and push on the head and just run out of, from being on bottom and it's like, whoa, I got up. That doesn't really happen against Islam. It's, oh man, I had to really work for that. I had to really scramble and I'm in the turtle position. And then Islam is now cranking on a darce or he's looking to take the back or whatever the case may be. Nothing is for free on the ground against Islam. And I just don't think Gary's been in there with somebody like that. And that's why I'm excited to see how Garry deals with this. And I'm excited to see how Islam deals with the range, the movement, the striking variety that Garry brings to the table, right? The poise, the accuracy. And what's interesting is to see, is Garry going to fight the same way that we've seen him fight, right? So we'll talk a little bit more about that in just a second. But the reality is, for me, cut and dry for Islam. Pressure this guy intelligently. Don't overswing and get yourself out of position where you can get caught with these counter shots on the way in. Be responsible, knowing that those kicks to the body, if you reach for them, those are going to be opportunities to where Garry is going to look to set up some of those high kicks. So you have to address the oblique shot, because that is going to be something that Garry will throw all night long. He does it to just about everybody. It disrupts your forward momentum. It disrupts your forward pressure. And if he's doing that all night long on Islam, that can get in the head of Islam. It can deter him from kind of planting and shooting these takedowns, could possibly even, compromise the leg, whatever the case may be. But I think it's simple. Islam needs to close him down, pick his moments to strike, then get Garry down. And if this fight starts to play out into the mid to later rounds, I feel like we may see Garry slow down just a little bit to where that's where Islam can start to really have a lot more success on the feet, to where he doesn't have to just kind of burn himself out with the grappling. Because if Garry does, find ways to scramble back to the feet and really make Islam work, that obviously will be very draining and burning on Islam's gas tank overall. So Islam, to me, has a big grappling advantage here. It's going to be on him to find ways to get the long-rangey Ian Machado Garry down to the floor. But while I say that Garry, to me, if it's on the fight, on the feet for 25, that should favor Garry, all I'm saying is don't sleep on the striking of Islam Makhachev, because not only is it very, very good, but he's gotten so much better at feinting, setting things up, setting up these high kicks, getting his boxing combinations going. And I think in terms of the boxing, he could potentially be better than Garry in that area. I think that Garry's the better overall kicker, but Garry's boxing, there's some weaknesses there. And we see that a lot of time with these rangy guys, right, where they kind of rely on the tall man defense. They throw out a lot of straight shots. We do see Garry throw some uppercuts and stuff in close, but I'd say in terms of the boxing variety, that might be an area to where Islam could potentially have an edge over Ian Garry, as well as the clinch with the knees and the elbows. And obviously, if you can land some of those takedowns, make Garry a little bit more hesitant to then start opening up with some of those shots on the feet, right? You wave the lead hand like Ankalaev does. You start to open some things up. I think Islam will come in with a very well-rounded mixed martial arts approach to go out here and try to get the job done against Ian Machado Garry. So that brings us to, where is my head at right now? Listen, I've picked Islam Makhachev every fight since he's been in the UFC. And I'm not going to start picking against him now as of this moment, man. Islam Makhachev, this dude is sensational. And I know that there's been fights where he's been tested, like in the Poirier fight. Volkanovski really pushed him, but you have to remember that was a prime Volkanovski at the peak, man, at 145. And Volkanovski is one of those guys where he's a short ball of muscle, who's a very high-level striker and has ridiculously good takedown defense. So a guy that's a little bit smaller and has that ball of muscle type of style, those are hard guys to get in on, man. And Volkanovski's got great speed and movement. And I know Garry's long and rangy and has the speed and elusiveness, but he's not that, smaller center of gravity ball of muscle to where it's going to be really hard to get in on him, right? The trick is going to be Islam being able to head him off, cut him down, cut him off, head him off, get to him, and be able to get to the takedowns. That's the challenge. But once he's able to get to that area, I think he's able to take Garry down a lot easier than a guy like Volkanovski. At least that's kind of where my head is at right now. So the reality is I think Islam Makhachev wins this fight, and I'm leaning towards a decision. Now, if Ian Garry comes out with a super aggressive, scrambling approach, which I think that there is a very good, shot that happens, then that is obviously going to open up the opportunities for Islam to chase some of those submissions. And obviously, Islam's one of those guys where he's going, to control position and not necessarily chase for a submission, but if it's there, he'll take it. And if he locks Ian Garry in a Darce, man, it is over. It's like a vice, man. And then you see Islam's back just getting involved. The dude, his back is insane, man. And a lot of that, leads into that strong squeeze that he has, the technique, the power. And I feel like that's just what it's going to be. While on the feet, Garry, of course, man, he's very, very slick, very elusive. Islam's good on the feet, to where I do still give, Garry a little bit of an edge there, but I think it's competitive on the feet. Where I don't know that it's necessarily as competitive as what it could be on the feet is on the ground. And it's going to be on Ian Garry to show us that he could go out here and deal with the type of grappling that Islam brings to the table, which is heavy top pressure, excellent transitions, excellent control, and is always usually 1 to 2, 3 steps ahead, right? The way that Garry walks you into traps on the feet, that's what Islam is able to do on the ground. He's like, oh, here you go. Here's a way out. And then you start to try to get back up and, I'm right in the front headlock position and I'm locking in a Darce. So there's levels on the ground. And I just feel like Islam, not only is he super technical and well-rounded as a grappler, but he's so smart with the way he operates in there, man. And his strength and pressure, it's different once he's able to get a hold of you and take you down and put you in those positions. And I know that Garry's very good. He's going to be very confident. I think that his ground game is better than some of the guys that Islam has fought recently for sure. But the reality is, when you go out there and Islam takes you down and he's getting you into these positions, not only is it hard to get back up, but it's also very, very draining because every explosion, every big move, every time you get back up, it's just draining on the gas tank. And if Islam starts to get these takedowns, and say he gets a takedown in round 1, he gets a takedown in round 2 to where he's keeping Garry down and Gary's not necessarily able to get back up, or even if he does, he gets drugged right back down. That is very, very taxing on the gas tank of the guy that's trying to get back up, as well as Islam trying to hold him down. But it's also taxing on the mind of the guy that keeps getting drugged back down. He's like, man, I landed a good shot, but now I'm back here again. It's like deja vu all over again, and now I'm getting a little bit tired. I can't move the same. He's faking takedowns, and now I'm getting clipped a little bit on the feet. Now he's taking me down, and I can't move the same. His pressure is crazy. Those are all possibilities in this fight. All I'm saying is Ian Machado Garry's in the prime of his career. He's very elusive. It'll be interesting to see how he opens up on the feet, considering I think this is by far the most complete fighter that Ian has fought and by far the best grappler that he has fought in his career. And sometimes we see guys, when they fight the best grappler they faced, they're worried about getting taken down. They may not throw the same kind of shots. They're a little bit more hesitant on the feet. And if that happens, obviously, that's a way where Islam can scramble the brain of Garry and start to open up on the feet and get the better of some of those exchanges. And then when Garry bites and starts to try to throw, that'll open up the hips for Makhachev to be able to get a hold of him and take him down. So I think Garry puts up a good fight. I think this is going to be a competitive fight. I think Garry can go out here and win a round or two for sure. But I'm leaning Islam Makhachev to get this one done by a very competitive decision. And if Garry comes out here and scrambles more than a guy like JDM, that submission is definitely going to be on the table for Islam Makhachev. And if Garry can go out here and stop these takedowns and have an answer, and make Islam work, push on the head, get back to the feet, get to space and play his game, he could absolutely go out here, stick and move, pick at Islam and win a decision that way, or possibly set some sort of trap to where Islam overextends, or there's just a shot he doesn't see coming and Garry is able to put him away. How crazy would that be if Garry goes out here and beats the #1 pound-for-pound fighter in the sport and the guy who's looked at as one of the greatest of all time? But I can't pick against Islam, man. That's just the way I feel. Not only is he one of my all-time favorites, but the guy is so skilled. He's so good. He comes in with good game plans, usually in most fights. And I'm sure that his team is going to have him more than prepared to come in here to deal with a rangy, very game striker who moves a lot and is very high level in Ian Machado Garry. I think Islam gets it done.